Can you believe there was a time when the US government declared war, not on a foreign enemy, but on its own people? In 1971, President Richard Nixon announced, "Drugs are America's public enemy number one." But behind that declaration wasn't a campaign for public health. It was a political weapon, aimed at people of color, the poor, and anyone who dared to oppose the government. More than 50 years have passed.
Very busy thoughts, then your brainwaves are going to be quite high, quite fast, and you will be in a rhythm that we call beta. And beta rhythms are pretty fast, and we want to slow those down. The problem with beta is that it kind of triggers our fight or flight response, our sympathetic nervous system response, and that means that the body is always on edge, is tense. So if you notice any tension in your breathing, in your shoulders, in the stomach, the jaw, you're clenching it, you have a hard, thick stir, then that probably indicates that you're in some sort of beta rhythm or fight or flight system.
A lot of evidence to suggest that this whole thing was orchestrated, marionette puppeteered by the CIA, that this was a PSYOP, an MK Ultra program to diminish and demonize the revolutions that were uprising all throughout the culture in the United States. You have the hippie movement, you have the Black Panther, the civil rights movement springing up all around. People are waking up. You have the LSD, the psychedelic culture shaping and awakening the consciousness of a generation. This isn't good when you're trying to have wars and maintain the military-industrial complex, which is happening at the same time in Vietnam, and they're dropping nukes, and they say, I don't know, that this was one of the ways that the movements were demonized, but that's a whole nother story.
Can I make a summary just for people who are like, what the fuck is going on right now? Essentially, what you're saying is that Charles Manson was a part of some sort of a program.
Yeah.
And that through this program, they were using him and using with LSD and all the members of the family, they were turning them violent. And why do you think they were doing that?
That the real enemy was never drugs, but the prejudice it created for itself. When Nixon declared war, the enemy was the people. In June 1971, President Richard Nixon stepped before the cameras and made a historic announcement. America's public enemy number one is drug abuse. But behind the curtain, the enemy he truly feared wasn't heroin. It wasn't marijuana. It wasn't even addiction. It was political dissent. It was civil rights. It was the people. Nixon's administration couldn't legally outlaw being anti-war or black, but they found another way. According to his top aide, John Ehrlichman, the plan was simple and sinister. We associated the anti-war left with marijuana and blacks with heroin, and then heavily criminalized both. That way, we could disrupt those communities. The war on drugs wasn't born from a concern for public health. It was born from fear, of protest, of change, of a new America rising.
That in childhood I'd literally been subjected to systematic manipulation designed to erase my personality, I suddenly saw everything clearly. Since I have a highly visual imagination, I instantly formed a mental image of mycelial network, one that, as it turns out, was a perfect structural model for the entire system. That's how the concept of cordyceps was born. Because this thing works very similarly. An ant carries cordyceps spores to a high point, not because the ant wants to, but because that's what cordyceps needs for reproduction. It operates according to all the laws of systems theory. like a parasitic neural network whose primary function is self-replication and spread, using our brains as its hosts. Believe that nobody else saw this. Yes, philosophers had written about this from different angles, but nobody had described the entire system as a global neural network. This still surprises me because once you see it, it starts to seem obvious. This explained absolutely everything. Why everything around me operated by the same hidden logic. Why manipulators used identical phrases. Why toxic parents behaved with mechanical precision. Why I kept falling into the same destructive relationships. And why none of it could be changed by willpower alone. It wasn't just an explanation, it was a structural map, a complete blueprint of how the parasite spreads, hides, and protects itself. It also explained the bigger questions: why bureaucracy dominates the world, why so many people are depressive, what religion actually is, what stupidity is, why people lie and manipulate, what good and evil really are. It was like spending your entire life wandering around a dark room, bumping into unexpected objects here and there, and suddenly you find the light switch. But the system lives in our blind spot, otherwise it couldn't control us. When I saw all this, all my traumas dried up and fell off. I realized there's no inner child. That's an artificial split. It's not some child. It's me. And I exist. That's what I felt. It felt like coming back to life from a 40-year coma. My mind became quiet. The anxiety disappeared. The lifelong chronic shame and guilt vanished. I realized I didn't need to learn to stand up for myself. I just had to stop suppressing my own signals in order to remain convenient. After that, something else started operating in the background. I call it manipulation watchdog, a kind of internal response system that reacts immediately, often faster than conscious recognition. If someone tries to manipulate me, I'll feel it as a sudden shift, a spike of adrenaline or anger before I even realize what's going on. It's as if the system now flags any parasitic behavior before it reaches the rational layer. Anyone who sees how everything actually works will probably feel like a lonely madman, a heretic in church, the boy who sees that the emperor has no clothes. And this is exactly why it all has to be said. The moment you see the cordyceps, the parasitic program, running in the background of human consciousness, you can't unsee it. You start recognizing its patterns everywhere, in family dynamics, workplace hierarchies, political systems, religious institutions, therapeutic relationships. You realize that what you thought were personal problems were actually symptoms of systematic programming. What you thought was your personality was actually a parasitic operating system installed to control your behavior. And once you see the puppet strings, they no longer work. The most liberating part wasn't healing anything. It was seeing the entire structure for what it was, a behavioral system designed to override autonomy and replace it with compliance.
Arena seems to be laid out like a clock, with a new threat every hour, but they stay only within their web.
The arena can begin. Obviously, there's the outer shell of the arena that we see catching fire when Katniss breaks the arena. This shell serves so many purposes within the creation of the arena. Not only does it physically delimitate where the arena is, it actually helps control everything inside it. Using this shell, the game makers can decide whether it's night or day for the tributes. However, this shell also creates a little bubble. Within this bubble, there can be a type of biodome. These biodomes are things that we actually have in our society now. This is how the game makers can control the weather within the arenas. These biodomes are controlled using temperature and humidity controllers. You can make it very hot and dry or very cold and wet. This is why each arena can be completely different, and one year you can go from a desert to the next year a frozen tundra. It's just using these controllers. This also explains how the game makers can make it hot eventually and then 5 minutes later have it be boiling hot and dry. Like lakes or small mountains, for example, may actually be built purposefully for this arena. Aren't just these more natural or natural-based things. There's some crazy things going on at the same time. For example, there's holograms. Now, obviously, if there's holograms, that means there's hologram technology, so that's kind of self-explanatory as to how they use it. One question I see a lot though is the tree in the 74 Pocket games that falls in front of Catman.
Give me a tree right there. Sure.
And you spend your life chasing this elusive, ever-receding horizon of being enough. We're constantly told to work on ourselves, grow, evolve, as if we're some kind of defective product, fresh off the assembly line, just waiting for the right software update. And if you're not constantly striving, constantly fixing, constantly optimizing, well, then you're seen as lazy, unmotivated, stagnant, a problem. But let's be blunt. Most of what passes for self-improvement isn't about liberation. It's about deeper enslavement. It's just another branch of the same system that tells you you're broken, flawed, and need fixing. Just like therapy, which we talked about before, the entire self-improvement machine operates within the cage. It gives you shiny new tools to polish the bars of your own prison. If you're constantly improving, it means you're never actually improved, right? It's an endless loop, a treadmill designed to keep you running, consuming, striving, but never truly arriving. Because if you actually arrived, if you were truly free, truly whole, truly autonomous, you wouldn't need their books, you wouldn't need their courses, you wouldn't need their gurus, and the system simply cannot afford for you to be truly free. The system doesn't want you to be yourself, it wants you to be its optimized version of yourself. A perfectly functional, compliant, productive unit. It wants you to be happy in a way that serves its needs. Happy enough to work, to consume, to conform, but not so happy that you start questioning the fundamental absurdity of it all. Not so truly fulfilled that you stop needing its endless solutions to its own manufactured problems. This is the brilliant, insidious genius of it. It takes your genuine desire for well-being, for growth, for freedom, and it funnels it into pre-approved channels. Channels that lead you right back to the system. You think you're taking control of your life, but you're just learning to operate its controls more efficiently. You think you're finding your purpose, but you're just slotting yourself into a pre-assigned function. It's the ultimate illusion of control, like giving a hamster a fancy wheel and telling it it's improving its running technique. It's still in the cage. It's just running faster, feeling more productive. The real self-improvement doesn't happen when you try to fix the personal flaws the system has convinced you are yours. It happens when you stop believing in their map entirely, when you step off the treadmill, when you see that the chase itself was part of the trap.
This is the construct. It's our loading program. We can load anything from clothing to equipment weapons, training simulations, anything you need.
Right now, we're inside a computer program.
Is it really so hard to believe? Your clothes are different, the plugs in your arms and head are gone. Your hair has changed. Your appearance now is what we call residual self-image. It is the mental projection of your digital self. What is real? How do you define real? If you're talking about what you can feel, what you can smell, what you can taste and see, then real is simply electrical signals interpreted by your brain. This is the world that you know. The world as it was at the end of the 20th century. It exists now only as part of a neural interactive simulation that we call the matrix.
Experience are normally cognitively filtered out. With psychedelics, all of these things begin to be re-experienced as though they were brand new, and no longer relegated to the subconscious mind. Which is why psychedelic experiences produced a renewed attention to subtleties, which may have been ignored previously. One prominent example of this is color perception, as psychedelics can draw our attention to shades and hues which we may have never taken note of before, allowing our minds to differentiate multiple colors in our environments, rather than mentally blending similar hues together. Mescaline raises all colors to a higher power, and makes the recipient aware of innumerable fine shades of difference, to which, at ordinary times, he is completely blind. This seems to have an analogous effect with sounds, especially with music, where it becomes possible to hear subtleties in music which are ordinarily unheard. Through cultivating these altered states of awareness, we open our minds, so to speak, to the true complexity of the world, where we can deeply ponder the true wonder of the universe. This state of mind is normally experienced in the life of every child. Children experience the world in all of its fullness, with few cognitive restraints, and the world is experienced as strange and unfamiliar. As kids, we are more easily engrossed in our environments, a feeling which becomes diminished as we grow older. This type of perception is sometimes referred to as sheer perception, where, for example, this car would be perceived as a raw mass of shapes and colors without any coherent identity. But as we grow older, our minds stop focusing on these details and see the object as a whole. In autistic children, this ability is retained into adulthood, which is one of the reasons why people with autism experience the world in the way they do. In this sense, altered states of consciousness return us to a state of childlike wonderment, where the world is much more fascinating and beautiful. As Huxley writes, visual impressions are greatly intensified, and the eye recovers some of the perceptual innocence of childhood, when the sensum was not immediately and automatically subordinated to the concept. The formation of a cognitive reducing valve is partially a consequence of our language, which enables us to simplify the world, quickly categorizing people, things, and places according to our language schema. Just as these objects elicit an immediate sense of recognition, because our language allows us to efficiently organize our sense perceptions, without needing to analyze each detail. Other states of consciousness are also similar to experiencing mescaline. During a mescaline experience, it often feels like a person's will has been diminished, as though they are beginning to lose control over their thoughts and actions, as the ego structure widens and gradually dissolves, as frequently occurs in schizophrenia. The schizophrenic is like a man permanently under the influence of mescaline, and therefore unable to shut off the experience of a reality which he is not holy enough to live with, which he cannot explain away because it is most stubborn of primary facts, and which, because it never permits him to look at the world with merely human eyes, scares him into interpreting its unremitting strangeness, its burning intensity of significance, as the manifestations of human or even cosmic malevolence, calling for the most desperate countermeasures, from murderous violence at one end of the scale to catatonia or psychological suicide at the other. And once embarked upon the infernal road, one would never be able to stop. The theory of the reducing valve, which modern psychology is largely in agreement with, helps to explain differences in cognition between individuals and can make you wonder how much of your mind falls beneath the threshold of consciousness. Cognitive experiences of the world and fields of perceptibility may differ between individuals. Many artists who are able to give attention to details, which ordinarily seem mundane, probably experience consciousness in a less limited way than on average, giving them the ability to create new forms of expression. What the rest of us see only under the influence of mescaline, the artist is congenitally equipped to see all of the time. His perception is not limited to what is biologically or socially useful. A little of the knowledge belonging to mind at large oozes past the reducing valve of brain and ego into his consciousness. It is a knowledge of the intrinsic significance of every existent. Those who are artistically and creatively gifted are able to release their minds from the cognitive restraints of the reducing valve and more easily see the beauty in the world. These states of mind can be reached with many techniques, including dehydration, meditation, or through entheogenic compounds. It might be tempting then to believe that the best way to live would be with an open reducing valve, minimally constrained. But if we perpetually lived in this state, it would no doubt do harm. The reducing valve evolved as an evolutionary advantage, which allows us to extract information from our environments quickly, without becoming mesmerized by the details. A brain that isn't constrained by the cognitive reducing valve perceives the world with fresh eyes, which allows one to deeply ponder the nature of existence, fathoming the deep interconnectedness of all things, and the oneness of this mysterious universe. Each person is at each moment capable of remembering all that has ever happened to him, and of perceiving everything that is happening everywhere in the universe. The function of the brain and nervous system is to protect us from being overwhelmed and confused by this mass of largely useless and irrelevant knowledge, by shutting out most of what we should otherwise perceive or remember at any moment, and leaving only that very small and special selection, which is likely to be practically useful. In other words, the mind can be thought of as a reducing valve, which constrains the totality of our perception to that which is actually relevant to survival. We are sentient of a huge number of perceptions at any given time, but only a tiny proportion of these ever become conscious. So while we are constantly perceiving a wide range of experiences, our brains filter most of this out. This wider field of awareness, to which we can potentially be conscious, is called by Huxley mind at large. And the mind acts as a sort of filter to prevent all of these perceptions from overwhelming us. To make biological survival possible, mind at large has to be funneled through the reducing valve of the brain and nervous system. What comes out at the other end is a measly trickle of the kind of consciousness which will help us to stay alive on the surface of this particular planet. Mescaline, as well as other psychedelic compounds and shamanic techniques, appear to open the so-called reducing valve, allowing our minds to focus on details that would have otherwise been filtered out. People who have psychedelic experiences report having an unusual interest in subtle details, which they may have never noticed before. Normally, the mind does not pay any attention to these insignificant details, but the unrestrained mind can't help but be fascinated by, for instance, the veins of a leaf, the individual grains in a clump of sand, or the individual hairs on your skin. Indeed, much of what is experienced during a psychedelic episode isn't necessarily a hallucination. It is simply your mind paying more attention to what you hadn't noticed before. You can make note of many things right now, which, although you perceive them, often do not come to your attention.
So for some people, their belief systems allows for that, and for others, it's just too far beyond what they currently, the framework that they live their life within. And it's, yeah, I agree with you. People really do need to know that this is available. The tricky part is knowing who to tell, who to talk to. But I guess if you have information like what you're doing, you put information out there, then people come to it of their own accord. So
yeah, and I just think now is the right time as well. Like you look at the consciousness of individuals are ready to receive it. You know, now you look in the past. Even when I was 16, trying to share this stuff it just wouldn't work. The consciousness just wasn't there for one of the important parts, though, is getting people to understand that this is not just for one individual. A lot of people, when they hear stories like this, they think it's for one person, or you have to be some dedicated, trained for this for your entire life and all that stuff. And you don't have to do that at all. You need to understand certain things like sleep cycles, what sleep paralysis is, and how to control that. And when people learn how to do that, everybody can access what I call the other side, while they're physically here. And a lot of people, when they hear that, sometimes it sparks something within them to try it. But when they're presented with the opportunity, like I've had a friend where I was showing him like the out of body stuff, giving him tips and stuff like that. And I said, this is the stuff that you could experience. You'll experience this. You may see a being in the room. If you see a being in the room, don't freak out. And so he's used my method of doing the out of body state, and he's in sleep paralysis. He's there. Yeah. So everything that you said, actually, I'm in sleep paralysis as I'm coming out. But I felt this being in the room, and I was like, no, I'm not ready for this. And then he just snapped himself out of it. So even like that, it's almost like some people just aren't ready to see it just yet. And so they prevent themselves due to anxiety, fear. I don't feel like I'm ready for this yet, because it's more real than this experience here. It's hyper real. So yeah, I like to say it's more dense, right? But that's just another way to.
I always found the idea of accessing like different realities really exciting, and I think that was also part of my problem. I didn't go for very long because I was so excited about the fact that I managed to do it, and so pretty much the opposite of fear. I don't know why. I didn't feel like it was anything to be afraid of, but it sounds like a lot of people are. Do you find that occurs much with the people that you work with, where it's the fear that gets in the way for them, or is there some other thing?
It's fear all the time. I would say 99% of the time it's fear. And if it's not fear, then it's when they actually leave the body, they get too excited and they're like, oh crap, I'm actually out. And then it's sucked right back in. Yeah. But it's typically fear of, you have to get rid of the fear of death, like first and foremost. Like you have to be in these experiences, as you would know in sleep paralysis, could be incredibly scary for people to experience that. Now, in order to leave and not wake up the body, you need to get into a space where you say to yourself, I'm okay with dying, even though you're not going to die. You just have to be that calm all the time. And that's a hard one for people to break, because it's people still, deep down inside, the fear arises because they think there's still this 1% doubt that the universe dictates consciousness instead of consciousness dictates the universe. And if you believe that the universe dictates consciousness, then you believe that there's a potential end to you. There is death, and you don't continue living. Your consciousness does not continue when you leave the body. So there's those things sometimes, and it's also, if you have I was just talking to someone the other day that has a child, and he was about to come out of his body as well. And it's that him having a child in the background was coming up to the forefront of, all right, I'm in sleep paralysis, I'm just about to pop out, but what if I do die? The fear of death pops in. It's like child, wakes you up, anxiety. So fear is the biggest part that stops you from not only accessing the other side, but leaving your body.
So how do you help people through that fear?
It's helping them, but it's giving them reassurance, most importantly. It's mainly just me saying, this is what you will feel. This is what it will feel like. It's going to feel like you're dying, but you'll pass this stage and then you'll feel this, and then you can leave and stuff like that. And it's almost like when they go through that experience and they're like, oh, wow, what Darius has said is actually, that's what I feel right now. And it's that reassurance. It's okay, yeah, everything's going to be all right. Because it's taken me a long time to get rid of it myself. And it's just like when you have somebody, like if someone were to share what I'm sharing now, when it was happening to me every single night in 2014 in Morocco, I would be accessing so much more stuff, like way back then, and information and clarity on things. But I didn't have anybody explaining to me what sleep paralysis was, how that's the gateway to access the other side, getting rid of the fear, giving me that just reassurance, really, Related
to OBEs is lucid dreams. So I became interested in lucid dreams around, I guess, 6-9 months ago. And I've had more success there. And what I mean by that is being in a dream and then realizing, oh, I'm actually in a dream. I'm actually dreaming. And then solidifying what I'm experiencing. I usually do that just by looking at the ground or trying to actually look closely at my hands, but looking at the ground seemed to work better. And then in the process of looking at the ground while I'm dreaming, things often change. And then it just becomes like realer than real at that point. So I'd realize that, yes, I was dreaming and now I'm not, but I'm still asleep on the bed. So how does that happen? What's your understanding of that process where you go from dreaming to suddenly being lucid and being very aware?
Fully conscious, yeah.
Yeah.
So I've done that myself. So when you're in a dream, let's just say, because you're not fully consciously there, that's why it's still fuzzy, right? But when you focus on something in a dream, which is accessing your field, you can become exactly what you said. You focus on one thing. I focused, when I was doing it, I was in the living room and I was focusing on a cup on the bench. And then that brought me right back in, fully 100% there. Because I don't know the exact reason why that happens. It's just, I think, because you're focusing so much, you're bringing your conscious fully there instead of just wandering.
Yeah, like a little piece of it.
Yeah, like a little fragment here. This is why when people are dreaming, they can't remember the details of things. But if people were dreaming in their dream space and they were to just stop and realize that they're dreaming and focus on one thing, they'll be fully pulled in, 100% fully aware there. And at that point, if you know how to navigate that space, you could pop out of your dream field, your thought forms, etc., and actually have an out of body and access, like I said, things that are happening in real time within this realm, etc. But typically people don't know that, and then they're just conscious within the dream. They don't know that they could access more than just that field, that space.
Let's start with this very important question. What is an out-of-the-body experience?
What is it? Well, it's best described as a state of consciousness awareness that does not depend on physical sensory input, meaning it is acting separate and apart from your physical body. Recent studies indicated that 25% of the population in the United States remembers having at least one spontaneous out-of-body experience. There's been a lot of scientific discussion as to what that is, and our religions have given it a name too. Basically, you are able to exercise facsimiles is the best word of the sensory input that you have in the physical sense, in the physical continuities. So if you can think of that you are perceiving and separate and apart from this physical mechanism that provides you with this input, you're able to see, for example, and you were able to hear. That out-of-body consciousness, as it were, is able to be, let's say, 2 inches away from the physical, or if you want to put it at the extreme, you can go to Mars and cruise around Mars and see what's going on there. It's that unlimited.
Now, there are those who would refer to this as the astral body. Would that be a good term to use here?
Oh, well, we don't like it, and the reason we don't like it is because it has sort of an occult connotation to it, in the sense that it was used in a time sort of prior to the scientific model that we attempt to follow. So we way back in the early 60s came up with the OB, out-of-body experiences. We were and are professional sound people. In other words, sound was our business, the production of sound in various ways. So we turned to sound quite naturally in order to do these things. First of all, in order to find out how we could begin to control the out-of-body experience, we began to use sound. Sound to affect consciousness. We soon learned that by using known brainwave frequencies and converting them into what sound amplitudes, not frequency, but sound amplitudes, we were able to induce sleep very easily and to stay awake very easily. And that was the beginning. Those are categories of consciousness. And we used that running frequency of amplitude to create a resonance by listening to it. And these induce various states of consciousness, basically. We call it a frequency following response because you can identify them by taking an EEG, a brainwave study, and see these particular patterns within the brain. So if you wanted a person to go to sleep, you would feed a particular system of theta and delta waves and they would get sleepy. And then as we went on, we found a better way to do it because these brainwave frequencies that are common in the human brain are of a frequency that is lower than human hearing. Let's use an illustration that here's an 8 hertz signal, which means 8 cycles per second, that we cannot hear. So how to get it into the human brain other than using an amplitude method? We found the binaural beat would work very beautifully in that respect. But in essence, it works this way. If we put a 100 hertz audio signal, which you can hear, and put it in one ear, and put a 108 hertz signal in the other ear, the differential between those two would be an 8 hertz signal. When we used that and had a person listen to it, the brain would synthesize that 8 hertz frequency. The brain wouldn't hear it, incidentally, but the electrical signals in the brain synthesize that 8 hertz differential. A slight variation of it as far as the Schumann resonance is the one that we as humans grew up with through millions of years, and it will create a form of physical relaxation. There are different kinds of meditative states. For example, years back there was a great to-do about getting into the alpha state, and it was, let's get ourselves into alpha. Alpha is just a state of conscious relaxation, and we have not found it interesting enough to play with.
What about theta?
Theta is a state where a lot of creativity occurs in theta. It's great for ideas, word pictures, and things like that. The crossover state between this type of consciousness and the consciousness of delta sleep. Because of that, you are partially freed of the restrictions that are upon you during this normal wakefulness here. And as a result, you are free, your mind is free to perceive in ways it has not perceived before. And that's where a lot of meditation takes place.
So you like to look at this thing in a pragmatic way, I guess, scientifically speaking.
Very much.
All right, now let's say then pragmatically, what would be the purpose of an out-of-the-body experience then?
Well, that's the enigma, the question. That took me a lot of work to find out what value it had, if any. And the second thing is that through the years, what purpose? That's open to a lot of discussion. There have been all sorts of ways that one can use it and one does use it. I think the key thing is to recognize that we are firmly sure now that everyone goes out of their body during what we call delta sleep or deep sleep. But that's a sleep where you are at very low level of physical response. And it's that deep sleep that we all have during our sleep cycle for anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes and maybe sometimes more. We all have cycles of delta. We have cycles of an hour and a half cycle of sleep, a pattern we have all during our whole sleep period. But a part of that is the delta sleep state. And we sort of drift down to that delta state, and then we get there, and then we become totally inert. Blood pressure goes down, temperature goes down, and we respond very little to any external stimulant. We found in lab studies that a person in the out-of-body state resembles near perfectly the profile of delta sleep.
All right, now the difference, of course, is their consciousness. Is that right?
That's true. A person in the out-of-body state, by a peculiar kind of means of establishing still a relationship with the physical body, can report in while they're in the out-of-body state.
All right, now let me stop for a second. What you're saying is that people that you have worked with recorded out-of-body experiences, is that correct?
That's true. Mm-hmm.
Those experiences from those people are such that they're actually able to respond while they are out of body. What do we know about that then?
They report what they're doing and how they're doing. Some very few, and it is few, you can communicate back to them. In other words, they're using their hearing and vocal means to, in turn, stay in contact with you. It's a learned thing, a thing that you have to learn. And not everyone can do it.
Now, if an EEG looks at a person who is talking to you during this state, does the EEG show delta still?
It shows delta superimposed with a beta signal, or a composite beta signal, that indicates a part of the brain is operating to do this communication process.
Now, that's very interesting. I presume that was really interesting.
Yeah, the speech center becomes activated.
Okay. Throughout my entire life. And it wasn't until I started to realize that in getting rid of the fear is when I started to access all things, really. Remember a lot of things, like the records, accessing thoughts, time as well. And I wanted to find a way that I could start to control it because they were out of the blue for me. I was like, okay, I really need to find a way to control this state. All right, so if I'm entering sleep paralysis, naturally, how do I actually control it and get there when I desire to do it? And so through the years, really, I've developed my personal method that I use for myself, which is to pretty much when I choose to leave my body every single night, right? So when you're in sleep paralysis, what I failed to miss in the beginning of it is that's the gateway to access the other side without having a near death. Now, the out of body and near death are one and the same thing, because an out of body is a controlled near death. They turn exiting the body. Now, when you're in sleep paralysis, there is a temporary window, right? So if someone like you as a kid, you're in sleep paralysis. Now, what happens if you do nothing, and if you don't know what to do, then that eventually subsides and you wake back up, right? So like that sensation of, the body feeling like it's dying, it does subside, and then you wake back up. Now, in that brief window, if you do certain things right of pushing yourself out, you'll leave every single time. The sleep paralysis is one of the hardest parts to get to if you don't do it naturally, right? But it's the hardest places to get when you want to control it and do it at will. But people that get there naturally, it's just getting rid of the fear, understanding where you're at, and every single time without missing it. When you do it for the first time, it's a shock, it's a rush. It's like when you leave the body and you're actually leaving your body and you turn around and you see yourself sleeping on the bed again and you look at yourself and you're still physical. It's a big rush. Typically it's fear, anxiety, or just, holy shit, I've done it. Those are high-end emotions that you feel. If it's when you just leave, if you have a lot of anxiety, excitement, just when you leave the body, you get sucked back in because it wakes the body back up. So it's like you have to learn how to control those emotions when you're coming out, because when you create like a distance within the body, like when you're out and then you create distance and then you're out for, let's say, 30 seconds. At that point, you could do whatever you want. You won't get pulled back in because there still is a slight magnetic pull back to the body as you're just coming out. If you mess things up, you just get sucked back in as well. So.
Yeah. Okay. Did you relate to Robert Moreau's book, which was Journeys Out of the Body, where his initial experiences with OBEs, where they were happening against his will?
I've never read it.
It's interesting. Yeah, it's the same. He spoke about it wasn't something that he wanted to have happen, and he got to the similar point to what you mentioned, where he was saying, "I just wanted to stop doing this." He thought he was going mad.
That's what it could feel like, right? So it's like when you're accessing the other side, the unseen becomes seen to you. That's pretty much everything. There's a point in this that I've tried, and it's like a pointless endeavor, but I've tried to prove myself wrong, prove that I'm hallucinating, crazy, like all those things, like all those silly things. And then you start seeing things happening in real time. You go to your friend's house, you see them doing something in real time that you possibly couldn't know. You confirm it with them, they get freaked out. You start accessing the true nature of reality, the true universe, where we are. Some things the reason why they want to convince themselves that what they're experiencing isn't true, even though it is, because a lot of things goes against a lot of people's current belief systems. Right.
So what's your understanding of what the out-of-body experience, astral travel, for want of a better word, I know they're not terms that you're particularly fond of, but what's your understanding of what the phenomena is with what you've learned so far?
So the dream and the astral are I'm just going to put them as one and the same thing. They're in the same category, really. Because typically, all right, and this is typically, when you are dreaming, most of the time, you're accessing your dimensional space, your field. This is where you could get individuals when they're dreaming, they experience potential or can see potential time events. So this is where you get people when they're dreaming, they see, if they have family members in their circle, right, and they're in their time event, they could see potential future time events or something that, I've seen the future, and then they wake up either a day later or a week later, they're like, wow, that actually did take place. Because when you're dreaming, it's your field, so you're able to tap into your thoughts, potential time events within your field, and also your fears and pleasures, right? This is where you get the dreams where like you're running but you can't move, something's after you, your fears are expressed there, so therefore you experience that, and therefore your pleasures. The out-of-body state, the near-death, right? OBE near-death, one and the same thing. When you're doing that, you're not just accessing your field, but you have access to your field, individual fields, the realm, dimensional spaces, and access to all things, right? So it's like the dream space is just a limited version of accessing more things that's available to you. when you leave the body 100% and become fully conscious and aware there.
We'll begin in that system of sensing, a world before mind, where we have a pre-conscious state that is a state of beingness rather than up there in mind and conscious awareness. And we're yet to accumulate that world of meaning, that dictionary, which then changes how we experience the world. We start to experience it with interpretation, with interpreting rather than sensing it. And then after that, we gain all the indoctrination and inheritance of culture and ego, etc., and all the cladding, and then that changes how mind experiences it. And so it's a progressive level of change in how we experience the world.
It comes down generally to one thing, and that is mindset, effective mindset. Often people are fixated by their techniques, and they look at the techniques themselves as a magic bullet. Techniques are not a magic bullet. If there is one, it's your own mindset. And a self-empowered mindset is the essential key to effective out-of-body exploration. In other words, your ability to break free from all of the subconscious belief systems and indoctrination that you've had from childhood. Many of us feel they're not indoctrinated. I hear this all the time. But I can assure you that we have all been the result of some form of indoctrination. Just think of it for a moment. We have been indoctrinated from birth to accept the idea that we are a biological being, that we are our bodies. We take it for granted because it's the basis of all civilization. Yet, in the first year of my out-of-body experiences, I learned a shocking thing. During many of my experience, I experienced myself beyond my humanoid form. And for me, especially in early 70s, this was a major shocker, because I realized that, oh my God, I'm not a human being, as I've been taught to believe. I am consciousness. I'm a pure consciousness with the ability to take any form, any shape that is necessary for me to achieve the goals that I'm setting for myself. In other words, the very basis of our entire civilization is based on the fact that we're human beings. But what if that assumption itself is flawed? And if that assumption is flawed, then how many of the other things that we have learned from birth are also flawed or absolutely false? It's about examining your own mindset closely and opening yourself to a greater potential of what you truly are. So the bottom line is that many people limit themselves by accepting, even often in their subconscious mind and conscious mind, of some fear-based philosophies. For instance, this idea of negative beings that are lurking to do harm to us. Nothing could be further from the truth. We are immortal, powerful beings. We create our reality. We're the ones who must take control of our state of consciousness. It's up to us to be the commander of our state of consciousness. The only thing in our life of value is what we take with us at the moment of our death. We're taking nothing else with us but our state of consciousness. That is the key. That's the only thing worth focusing on. Unfortunately, many people focus on the exterior, when the key to an effective mindset is to always focus on your own state of consciousness, to enhance your own state of consciousness. It's essential. For example, fearlessness. Fearlessness is a major attribute when you're exploring beyond your body. If you're afraid of every little thing that occurs, you're going to have a difficult time with this. You have to learn and understand, either in some manner, that you are immortal, you're creative, and you're powerful. You create your reality. And that will determine your path. That will determine the effectiveness of your OBEs and even the length of time you can maintain that state. Okay, also, it's important to realize that we are interactive. The non-physical dimensions are thought responsive. Many people don't even think of this. They think everything that they observe is a reality. It's not the case at all. All form, in all of its many guises, in every dimensional state, are a vehicle of consciousness. It's not reality itself, because reality is consciousness. So it's important to be aware and not be obsessed with the outer facade that you encounter, and stay focused on your inner self, or in your own state of consciousness. That's why it's so important to use controlled techniques like awareness now to enhance your state. The moment you leave your body, it is imperative to use a powerful command affirmation that will allow you to enhance your state of consciousness so you can be an effective explorer. In other words, for many years I started out using clarity now. That helped me to be sharper, to maintain my OBEs. Now, for the last 25 years, I've been using awareness now. It allows me not only to become sharper, but it also allows me to maintain the out-of-body state for extended periods of time. Any time that you feel yourself becoming heavy or less mobile, or your perception capabilities become diminished, you must enhance your state of consciousness. It's essential to prolong the experience. We have to be aware that all realities, physical but especially non-physical realities, are thought responsive to some degree, and that we have the ability to control that state, and we do it internally. Also, it's important to be, as far as mindset is, to be always open to your own potential. Own your own power, that you have the ability to have profound experiences. Know it within yourself. When you have an out-of-body experience, move inward. Know that you are the commander and that you have the ability to answer the questions, whatever question it may be. Ask questions. Make demands of yourself. Ask whatever you need to know. If you're in an unknown area, demand the answer. Where am I? Whatever it is you need, make that inner request and allow the answer to flow through you. Absolutely know that you have the ability to navigate, to observe and explore your non-physical realities, and own it. Accept your own personal powers. Realize that you are pure consciousness. You are temporarily, we're all using vehicles of consciousness for expression. We're doing it in the physical body. We need a physical body to express ourselves and to commune with others, to learn, to have physical experiences. And we also, in other non-physical realities, in other dimensional spaces, we will use other vibrational bodies. But you have to be aware that these bodies are not you. They're still vehicles of your consciousness. We possess many energy bodies. We're multi-dimensional beings. In the workbook, I will provide some clear, just say graphs that will help you to get a clearer idea of this. But it's know yourself, know your multidimensional nature, and you'll be more comfortable and have more ability to navigate. Also realize that you are immortal. You have nothing to fear. You have total control. When you know you're in control and you take the reins, you have full control. Also, realize that the out-of-body state is the most natural state. Actually, in our physical body, it's just a temporary experience. We're projecting our consciousness now into a physical body. Our out-of-body state is a much more natural state for us because we're closer to our own source.
So the system of sensing is our first world, and in our first world, we're really in our own world. It's this place where we accumulate huge amounts of experiences, sensory experiences, emotional waves, tones, movement, textures, smells, sounds, colors, patterns. We're both sensing this stuff, we are intuiting this stuff, we are experiencing it by merging with it. We become part of the music. We feel the music inside of us. We become part of that texture until we can't feel the separateness of ourselves and that texture. We're wrapped up in that texture. We experience the colours, but we move through the colours, and the colours feel like they're moving through us. We meet, we encounter people. We experience them like a kind of living music, like this music of beingness that has a different shape, in a sense, each one. And their shape changes how we experience it. So it's not yet a world of self and other. It's a world of self in other and other in self. And it's not a world of imitating. It's a world of merging in order to know something as the basic sensory and emotional experience of what we're merging with. So we are these experience machines, in a sense, and it's not yet a place where we consciously think about things. We're getting such a soup of sensory and emotional information. There isn't those structures yet with which to interpret and gain conscious awareness. So we're in a very pre-conscious state, and we're taking in far more than we can actually consciously process. And this is building up those maps, the repertoire, the dictionaries, in those connections in the brain that have not yet been made. And as such, because we haven't got all those connections made, there's nothing to filter what's coming in. And so we get overwhelmed, and we contract, and we scream, and we look away, and we, cry, or we space out, or we dissociate, or however we manage that, which I guess you could say is a bit autistic, and therefore we all have this autistic response to the world. And some people continue to have that, and others make enough connections in their brain that they begin to filter what's coming in, and they thereby cut down on a large amount of what's coming in, and they build their repertoires so that everything that's coming in progressively is coming in with meaning and it's manageable, and then we call those people less autistic. But because we're getting flooded with information and we haven't yet got those structures to filter this stuff, what happens with all that accumulated information is that it sort of sits within us. And if somebody was to, like as we get older and they try to tap into that directly, we might not feel we have that knowledge, that conscious awareness, and therefore we can't respond. But if they do something that maybe isn't what we expect, or they address somebody else, we might find that this unknown knowing suddenly comes through, and it surprises us. It surprises us because we didn't consciously know that we had any of that understanding that we'd done anything with that knowing, but it's unknown knowing because it came in without the filtering and it was being processed back there in that pre-conscious state, not in the conscious state, not in mind, what we know of as conscious mind. The pre-conscious state is really more, I guess, body. It's more like body brain rather than mind, where part of me was now incarnated, if you like, quite in the body. And so there was beginning to be, if you like, this separateness.
In other words, when this energy in the spine rises, the harmony occurs where the vibration turns into the sine wave at 7 cycles per second, or 7 hertz, as compared to the regular disrupted pattern. And as an engineer, he looked at the body in terms of vibrating systems or oscillators. And in this case, there are 5. The heart-aorta system, the brain itself, a cavity in the brain which is filled with fluid, a ventricle, and then the brain itself, the sensory cortex, and then all this results in an electromagnetic field around the head. A system which comes into harmony within itself becomes more powerful than others, and it will entrain, this is another term he used, it will entrain or pull after itself a system that is out of harmony. So once this oscillator or resonating system comes into harmony, it will trigger the rest one after the other. It's a domino effect. So as the heart pumps blood through the aorta, and he called the aorta the biggest plumbing in the body. So it's a tremendous impact on the body, and it shakes the body so that it vibrates. It hits the bifurcation into the legs, and a certain plane wave is reflected up. The next pulse comes down, and the plane wave and the pulse clash, and it creates a disruption in the body. When the harmonious 7 hertz vibration is set up, it seems that the heart and the lungs begin to talk to each other, and they begin to work in harmony, so that a pulse comes down and waits for the reflection to come up, and they both go up together, and then the next pulse comes down, and there is no clash occurring anymore, and the body goes into resonance, triggering the next oscillator, which is the brain. And looking at the head, again from the point of view of engineering, it's a rigid box resting on a resilient column, which is the spine. What happens is, as the body goes up and down, the skull is vibrated, and the brain, which is a gel-like substance, is floating in a fluid, the cerebrospinal fluid, so that each time the body goes up, it's hitting the skull and then goes down, and so up and down it goes, and it creates a plane wave within the brain. The brain has a characteristic called piezoelectric, which means that when it's stimulated mechanically, it develops an electromagnetic field around it, which is this field right here eventually. So this is the second oscillator, which triggers the third. This is the fluid-filled cavity in the brain called ventricle. And due to this regular vibration of 7 cycles or 7 hertz per second, a standing wave is established in the ventricle, which again creates a very harmonious frequency. And this in turn triggers the sensory cortex. This is a cross-section of the brain, and this is a cross-section of the third ventricle filled with fluid. On top of the third ventricle is a drum-like surface with a bundle of nerve fiber crossing it, which connects the right and left brain hemispheres. And this is very important because as the fluid vibrates harmoniously, it activates this nerve fiber, and it harmonizes the 2 brain hemispheres. And we know that consciousness opens up when the synchronization of the functioning of the 2 hemispheres occurs. And then a certain current is established in the sensory cortex in the lobe of the brain. And as I said before, all this results in an electromagnetic field around the head, so that the head actually becomes an antenna capable of sending out and receiving information which it could not do otherwise. And in that state, higher perceptions become possible. And this was Ben's theory, that through the mechanism of Kundalini and the resonant state of the body, higher perceptions become available.
When you drift into slumber, your pulse diminishes, your muscles unwind, and then you enter sleep. Yet your core essence, the vital force that defines your identity, vanishes completely. What happens to your awareness during the hours your physical form lies dormant? This isn't merely about dreaming. This goes beyond your mind, simply organizing daily memories. Ancient knowledge preserved in lost Egyptian scrolls and suppressed Tibetan manuscripts explains why you occasionally awaken possessing answers that weren't there before sleep, feeling as though you've experienced entire lifetimes in mere hours, or carrying mysterious anxieties with unknown origins. This reality is simultaneously terrifying and empowering. As your physical vessel rests, your awareness embarks on journeys. The encounters during these nocturnal expeditions actively reshape your existence, whether you're conscious of it or not. Various societies have named this phenomenon the Great Slumber, while others call it the Gateway of Divinity. However, a document destroyed by church authorities in 1587 revealed its true designation: the compulsory voyage. For every human soul must undertake it. 99% of travelers return from these expeditions with empty hands, not due to lack of access to hidden wisdom, but because nobody taught them how to identify the markers of these experiences. These signs exist within your physical form right now, waiting to help you remember what truly occurs during your sleeping hours, to harness the energy of these realms, and to integrate it into your conscious existence. If you've ever sensed that something far more significant unfolds during nighttime hours, that's your inner knowing calling out. In the coming moments, I'll provide you with the roadmap. You'll discover precisely where your awareness travels each night and how to return with abilities that will transform your earthly experience forever. You may extinguish the lights, wrap yourself in blankets, shut your eyelids, and regulate your breathing. But one aspect of you remains perpetually alert: your consciousness. The fundamental error we've been conditioned to accept is viewing sleep as complete unconsciousness, a necessary shutdown for energy restoration. Yet if this were the complete truth, how would we account for such intense dreams, life-changing encounters, or brilliant inspirations that emerge from apparent nothingness? We've been programmed to limit our existence exclusively to physical reality. Society convinced us that we are merely flesh and bone. But the prohibited manuscript, the one few have courage to examine, exposes a disturbing truth. While the body enters dormancy, consciousness continues its travels. As your heartbeat slows and your muscles release tension, your essence penetrates unseen dimensions of existence. Some traditions refer to these dimensions as astral realms, others as ethereal worlds. The terminology is irrelevant. What's crucial is recognizing that each night you become more liberated than you could imagine. This principle is both straightforward and revolutionary. Sleep serves as a temporary gateway to alternate realities. Your physical form functions like a charging dock. Your consciousness, however, operates like an explorer that cannot be confined. It persists in existing, discovering, and absorbing knowledge. You may have already experienced this phenomenon without recognition. That floating feeling before entering sleep, as though your body grew heavy while you felt weightless, or awakening with fragmented memories of locations you've never visited. yet seem mysteriously recognizable. An ancient mystical saying declares, "Every sleep is a minor death, and every awakening is a minor rebirth." You might have never considered sleep from this perspective, but the truth remains that the moment you close your eyes and surrender to darkness, something within you submits to a profound detachment process. Entering sleep literally means releasing control. You abandon alertness, you release the ego, you let go of your daily persona. Your body operates automatically. Your heart continues pumping, your lungs keep functioning, but your conscious awareness disconnects from the material realm. Within this disconnection, something remarkable occurs. The identical process that happens during death begins manifesting on a reduced scale. Ancient spiritual teachings explain that when we die, our consciousness detaches from the physical form to continue its eternal journey. During sleep, this separation is rehearsed. The distinction lies in sleep maintaining this connection, rather than permanently severing it. An invisible lifeline, recognized across many traditions as the silver thread, preserves this bond. This thread resembles an energetic conduit linking your material body to your living essence. While it stays unbroken, you can depart and return. When it snaps during actual death, the journey becomes permanent. Numerous wise teachers viewed sleeping as preparation for conscious dying. They instructed that individuals who master nightly death, embracing sleep as sacred surrender, approach actual death with serenity, understanding, and clarity. This explains why countless cultures cherished pre-sleep ceremonies, not merely to safeguard the resting body, but to direct the traveling spirit, reminding it of its mission even during states of separation. Perhaps now you grasp something profound. Our inability to recall sleeping experiences doesn't negate their reality. It simply indicates that the chasm between these two states, wakefulness and sleep, remains an unconquered enigma for most of us. However, bridging this gap is achievable. Understanding that sleeping involves minor dying represents the initial step toward living with greater awareness. Those who comprehend the delicacy and magnificence of this nightly passage begin treasuring every night, every dream, every floating sensation as pieces of wisdom far exceeding anything visible during waking hours. Among the lost insights regarding nighttime consciousness exists an ancient technique that few understand, one capable of dramatically enhancing your capacity to recall and navigate your out-of-body journeys: segmented sleep patterns. In historical civilizations, including Greek, Egyptian, and even throughout European medieval periods, human rest naturally separated into two major phases. People would slumber for several hours, awaken during midnight hours for reading, contemplation, or prayer, then return to sleep until dawn. This intermission between sleep segments wasn't viewed as problematic. It was frequently regarded as a holy period. Why does this matter for those seeking to access elevated consciousness during rest? Because the transitional phase between initial and secondary sleep represents one of the most productive zones for out-of-body experiences, conscious dreaming, and spiritual connections. When you naturally awaken during midnight hours, your brain remains submerged in slow brainwaves, theta and delta frequencies, while your logical mind begins displaying signs of alertness. At this junction between deep rest and conscious awareness, the boundary separating worlds grows thinner. You haven't fully awakened, yet you're no longer completely submerged in unconsciousness. You're positioned within a doorway. Seasoned practitioners of consciousness projection understand that moments of partial awakening, particularly during segmented sleep, are perfect for initiating deliberate separations from the physical form. This occurs when the body remains dormant and weighted, but the mind can direct subtle movements of consciousness, enabling travel between realities. Segmented sleep patterns also enhance dream recollection and astral journey memory. Since midnight awakening brings recent dreams to the surface, recording or meditating on them becomes significantly easier before they dissipate. If you desire to experiment with this approach, here's a straightforward method. Rest normally, permitting the initial sleep phase to occur, typically lasting 4 to 5 hours. Upon natural awakening or gentle alarm activation, remain lying quietly, focusing on bodily sensations. Rather than immediately rising, allow your mind to stay relaxed, flowing between thoughts and imagery. Attempt to re-enter sleep consciously, maintaining the desire to achieve awareness within dreams or initiate deliberate projection. This minor modification to your rest cycle might unlock internal gateways you never imagined possible. Segmented sleep represents an ancient remembrance, a forgotten inheritance from when we understood that sleeping wasn't merely resting, but journeying between dimensions. Each night, without your complete awareness, you encounter other forms of consciousness. Some of these entities feel familiar, others remain entirely foreign. Yet every meeting carries intention and instruction. When discussing other consciousness forms, we're not exclusively referencing human spirits in subtle dimensions. You can connect with spiritual protectors, departed loved ones, family members, friends, or kindred souls who have completed their transition and occasionally return offering comfort or direction. Teachers and mentors who are elevated vibration consciousness, forms that educate, motivate, and reawaken forgotten memories of your authentic source. These connections can occur symbolically, encoded within imagery, or directly through conversations, physical contact, or even wordless knowledge transfers. It's typical to awaken with powerful sensations of having been accompanied, detecting particular fragrances, hearing voices upon awakening, or carrying unexplainable emotions throughout the day.
This alignment eventually becomes a permanent situation so that one's range of perceptions is tremendously expanded. And another thing that happens is that this current or alignment goes also through the pleasure centers, so that actually a person in this state is in a state of bliss. Speed up the process of evolution, but we're all on this conveyor belt and nature is carrying us along, and we will get there anyway, from humanhood to godhood, whether we like it or not. So eventually, as this current continues, starts at the toe and goes up around the body, and it opens up certain energy centers in the body known as chakras. And eventually the current begins to go round and round, and its function is to clear the body of stress so that it can actually perceive higher realities. And if there is a blockage anywhere, it will keep pushing through that until it's cleared so that it can actually go further. And some people can experience great discomfort because of that, and not understanding what the mechanism is, and then wanted actually to inform the medical community, particularly the psychiatric community, about the phenomenon so that certain symptoms would not be misdiagnosed sometimes as they are, as schizophrenia or actually some physical illness, which it is not.
Is nothing stopping you from experiencing your inner self, your true self, your multidimensional aspects of yourself, except you. So you have to own it. And the more that you own it, the more these enlightening experiences will happen. It all comes down to mindset. And of course, persistence, as I've said earlier. Daily practice, persistent, and mindset will take you far. It will take you deep within yourself to the answers for yourself. tap into your own courage to become an effective explorer. Once you fully understand and realize and internalize within yourself that you are immortal, that nothing can stop you from obtaining your true knowledge of self, from experiencing your true self, then nothing can. The problem is that people have bought into these false and primitive belief systems that are fear-based. I have found in 45 years that all the fear-based philosophies out there are bogus. They're man-made to control us. Many of you already know this, but we have to internalize it, because in our subconscious minds, we all are the product of our childhood. I am as well. I was brought up in a very religious family, and I had to break free from that. And I had to examine it, and it took some effort. I had to really dig deep. And I would suggest that you do the same. Dig deep, take a look at your own mindset. Take a look at what do you believe? What supports what you believe? One of the most shocking things that I learned in the first 5 years of my OBEs was that almost every single thing that I have learned from birth was flawed or false. And it was shocking to me. Everything. And yet we accept so many, even the concept that we're a human being. Once you let's say, break free from all these self-imposed paradigms, your ability, your freedom to explore and experience your multidimensional self becomes greater and greater and greater until you have the ability to absolutely connect with even your higher self or your spiritual essence or whatever term you use. It's so important, and this all comes down to mindset. And this subject is not talked about enough. Instead, so many are fixated on just techniques. But take my word for it. Mindset is the key to out-of-body exploration. Own your personal power to explore within yourself without limits. Today, then people can have an enlightening, powerful experience immediately. They don't have to go into a cave and meditate for 20 years. It's a matter of opening up yourself so that you can truly experience that eternal, multidimensional aspect of yourself.
This is where we'll get into that there's no judgment on the other side, which I think it alludes back to the fear. A lot of people think that they're going to be judged on the other side. But a lot of people think they're going to get judged on the other side because they feel someone's going to judge them for the things that they have done here. This is where you hear karma and all those things. None of that is real. It doesn't exist. You cannot have unconditional love with a judgment. And if you really ask yourself that question, how could you have unconditional love with a judgment? You'll find that you cannot, because it's one of the unbreakable laws of the universe that never change regardless of opinions and perceptions. And when you leave, you are the only one that is the judger of yourself. They say the unforgivable sin is the one that you can't forgive yourself for. And that's what it's like on the other side. And so going full circle, back to your question, my uncle was showing me certain things that I've withheld here, like love. And it was just small, minor things, but it's like when you're there, you have so much access to all things. It's almost like when he was showing me certain things, he wasn't showing me in like a judgment sense. He was just like, look what you're doing here. And it's like that realization of my withholding of love, withholding of just my pure, authentic self, like my energy, just withholding that, brought me to my knees there in pain. And this is also, you do have the broad of different emotions on the other side too. You do have pain, you do have frustrations. That's why we've come here to begin with. A lot of people have come into this realm due to frustrations from the other side. And he was telling me, Darius, I was actually asking him too, I was like, what's the point? He said, they call it the great work. And the great work is waking people up to the other side. And he said, because when you wake up to the other side, you wake up to everything. And so that's the word that they use on the other side when it comes to this realm that we're within here, of the work that some souls are doing. which is waking people up to the other side, which is considered the great work there. It's just like we all get to the same destination, which is waking up to all things again. See everything becoming known to all souls again. Because we all have access to all information. All the records is within each individual soul. And what people tend to do is they tend to look outside of themselves when literally all of the information, even when you're out of your body, is always within you. That's the records of the beginning of everything. It's all within each soul. And we all go there because that's one of the inevitable event markers within this realm that takes place. Whether if that's through an out of body or inevitably when you die, when you cross over, you will eventually. It's not a matter of if you do, it's a matter of when you do it. You will cross over or do it through a controlled out of body state and access all things again. Remember it.
You mentioned their records before. One of my other previous guests has talked about accessing the Akashic records. Is that what you're referring to there?
So the records is, yeah, you could call it the Akashic records. Now, I've never heard of them say the Akashic records before. I've just heard the terminal. I've been shown the halls of Amente, the cathedrals, and also the universal records is what I've heard them say when I was out of my body on the other side. You do have your soul record, which is all of your soul's experiences. That's what people are referring to, the Akashic records. So yeah, it's a big library of information. The Akashic records is a part. It's not the records of things. It's a part of it. And it's the soul's records, was what they call it, the soul's records. And then the universal records is, imagine when you're accessing the records is, the universal records is just imagine it as an infinite white room. So it's this infinite, never-ending records of all things. And there are certain halls that you could go down. The hall on the left will lead you to your soul records. The hall on the right will lead you to the halls of Amente, etc., etc., etc. And there's records based on each experience, each realm, each construct within all of creation. They all have their records because everything's recorded. It's almost, yeah, every little detail of everybody's life is recorded here and is accessed. It could be accessed in the records of all things.